Good morning to everyone. We'll start today's proceedings with a prayer by Mrs. Chevelyn Williams Kernan, sorry. Please stand for the prayer. Thank you.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Thank you for your mercy. Thank you for your love. Thank you for bringing us all here. We pray for your wisdom. We pray for your knowledge. We pray that your Holy Spirit would abound with us, even at this session. And dear God, protect, guide, and be among us so that we can understand more about what we are here for. In your name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Mrs. Cowan. Her Excellency the Governor, Mrs. Sarah Tucker, Honorable Deputy Governor, Mrs. Lyndon Simpson, Honorable Deputy Premier, Mr. Samuel Joseph, Ministers of Government, Honorable Attorney General, the Financial Secretary, Permanent Secretaries, Directors, colleagues, invited guest media. I am Senior Disaster Management Coordinator at the DMCA, Astrid Wade, and I will be your chairperson for today's proceedings. It gives me great pleasure to extend to you all a very warm welcome on behalf of the Disaster Management Coordination Agency, DMCA. We are grateful that you have accepted our invitation for this year's National Hurricane Conference. With no further ado, I will now call to the podium for some remarks Lieutenant Colonel Alvin Ryan, the Director of the DMCA. Mr. Ryan.
Good morning, all, and thank you, Astrid, for this invitation. Please allow me to adopt the protocol so ably established by the Master of Ceremonies this morning. Forecast issued by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, is predicting another above-normal Atlantic hurricane season, which is the general consensus, as you will hear and observe later in the proceedings. As is the case with all hurricane seasons, residents and visitors on Montserrat are reminded that it only takes one storm to make it an active season. Keep in mind that even a weak tropical storm impacting Montserrat can cause major impacts, particularly if it moves slowly and rainfall triggers flash flooding, landslides, and flooding. The Disaster Management Coordination Agency, DMCA, is urging all residents, returning Montserratians, and visitors to take proactive steps now to ensure that their homes, businesses, and families are well prepared for this year's hurricane season. And I must say that along with the other associated risks that each season brings, every year we run the risk also of sounding like broken records. However, three simple truths come to mind. One, it really does only take one. Two, as humans, we tend to get complacent. And three, it is our duty to constantly inform and remind persons on Montserrat about the impending dangers. To that end, the DMCA cannot overemphasize the importance of early preparations, regardless of this year's hurricane predictions. Being prepared for the hurricane season can help reduce the impacts of storms and hurricanes on our lives, also our communities and businesses. Research has shown that families, individuals, and businesses who know their vulnerability and have taken concrete steps to prepare for a storm or hurricane are more likely to increase their chances of surviving than those who are not prepared. And I think that should be fairly obvious. Please don't wait until a storm or hurricane watch is issued, because it may be already too late to take certain precautions. Take steps now to prepare yourselves and your loved ones for this year's hurricane season. The COVID-19 pandemic cannot be ignored, even though there might be a thrust to regain some semblance of normalcy. We will continue to work closely and be guided by our Ministry of Health stakeholders, especially as it relates to possible shelter occupation. The DMCA continues to stress the importance of a coordinated approach in preparing and responding to any potential impacts from storms or hurricanes, ever remembering that hurricane preparedness is everyone's business. All residents and visitors are urged to get prepared and stay prepared. Pay close attention to the information being broadcast, printed, or otherwise disseminated to ensure that we remain in a heightened state of readiness for the next 6 months and even beyond. Please continue to monitor ZJB Radio, the DMCA's webpage, dmca.gov.ms. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter to stay up to date on the latest information about the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season. Let us continue to work together to ensure that any potential impacts from any storm or hurricane, God forbid, will have minimal effects on our island, our lives, and livelihoods. Please have a safe hurricane season, and remember, be prepared. And please, stay prepared, because it really only takes one. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Ryan, for that brief remark. Very informative, and I would advise everyone to take heed of the Lieutenant Colonel's warning. I now call to the podium Honorable Deputy Premier Dr. Samuel Joseph for his remarks. Dr. Joseph.
Good morning. As the other speakers before me, I adopt the protocol that was said before by Mr. Wade here. Be prepared, stay prepared, it only takes one. And I would like to focus on the last part, it only takes one. I remember when I was in grade 6, a long time ago, in St. George's Primary School, and we were discussing natural disasters, the different type of natural disasters that exist, hurricanes, floods, volcanoes. And I remember at that time when we were saying, why worry about volcanoes? The volcano that we have is dormant, is not something that can affect Montserrat. But we all know in this room how that turned out. So the other point that I want to emphasize on it only takes one, and it's something very interesting, and it was hinted at by Mr. Alvin here. The better you are at preparation is the more complacent people become. Because every year you get warnings about hurricanes and what you need to do, and this can happen, this can happen. And we as the public, we go out and we clear our public works, go and clear the drains, we'll go and cut all the trees that over the lines, we go and do all our preparations. Sometimes a tropical storm pass through a hurricane up to category 3. And we know in Montserrat when we hear about hurricanes, unfortunately, but we're going to get to that. If it's not category 4 or 5 or above, we're like, oh, whatever, it's just category 3. And it passes through, and because all these preparations have been made and all these things that we do to prepare for it, the damage that you hear can happen, you don't see it. And eventually, over the years, you start to get complacent and wonder why you have been harassed to do all the things when it's just little rain is going to come. Not understanding that a lot of work went in by different agencies, by different planning people, by the DMCA to ensure that you do not have the damage that could have happened if those things doesn't take place. So although our last major storm was a long time ago, I don't want to do the addition for another reason I'm coming to, but a lot of preparation goes into avoiding the disaster that comes from these natural phenomena that passes through our region, hurricanes and volcanoes. So we have to ensure that we are always vigilant and don't fall into the trap that because we haven't seen something happen last year, it happens to other countries, that is not going to happen to Montserrat. We do not know when it can happen to us. It only takes one, and as we're going to see in this conference, we have to be prepared. We have to have our community plan, we have to have our family plan, we have to have our plans for government and our own personal plan when the announcement comes, and even before they come, to be prepared. And that's the point that we have to keep stressing, that it's to be prepared for when these things come, so that if perchance we are unlucky with all the things that are happening to Montserrat right now and a hurricane passes through, that the impact is minimized and we don't get all the danger from it. Because I remember Hurricane Hugo passed in 1989, which I did the calculation and realized it's 30-something years ago, which is frightening. And when I was hearing people talking about, oh, hurricane is coming, and then the older people in the village were saying, oh, you young people don't know what it means, and this is what happened in Hurricane David, and this is what you need to do. And I remember thinking at that time, all these older people saying these things, until I realized one day that when I'm talking about Hurricane Hugo, that people below 30 have no idea what you're talking about, and I'm now one of these older people talking about things that happened back in the day. So that was a revelation. But to wrap up, because we have a long conference before us, is to remember the motto that says today, be prepared, stay prepared, and it does only take one. So over the past years, Montserrat, I won't use the word lucky because things happen to us, has been fortunate not to be hit by a major hurricane. We do not know what will happen. This year has been predicted because of the warming of the ocean and other activities. We do expect a more busy hurricane season, so we're asking all residents to be prepared and to be ready so that in case something happens, although we have the DMCA and the other agencies trying their best to protect us, in the end, a lot of things will still come down to us and personal responsibility to make sure that we are prepared. So be prepared, stay prepared, because it only takes one.
Thank you, Acting Premier, for your remarks. Let me apologize. I would like to recognize the presence of Mrs. Hector, Parliamentary Secretary, and the Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police, which I alluded to earlier. And Honorable Minister Kernan, welcome. I would now call to the podium Her Excellency the Governor, Mrs. Sarah Tucker, for her remarks.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I'd like to adopt the now amended protocol. And thank you for having me here today. Thank you for the invitation. It's really, really important. We're now 2 weeks into the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season, and we've already seen one named storm, Alex. Perhaps we could have a competition to get our own names going along, because Alex is not really up there for me, but anyway. A number of systems have already been formed, including one disturbed area this week, and so far we haven't had, thankfully, thank God, any impacts. But, as Alvin has said, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has predicted an above-average hurricane season this year, with up to 21 named storms, many of which can become hurricanes, and there's a possibility of up to 6 major hurricanes this year. This isn't my first hurricane season in the Caribbean, and as Governor, one of my main concerns is to maintain the safety and security of Montserrat during hurricane season. We began our annual campaign for hurricane safety with the hurricane messages from the Director of the DMCA, the Premier and myself, and the DMCA is getting ready to prepare and distribute its annual hurricane manuals, as you've got today, and my office has already had its yearly hurricane plan test in preparation for the season, which obviously highlighted some of the things that we haven't quite got ready, so we need to do those. So it's always best to test things. And with this conference now, I really urge the community to start thinking about and working on your own plans swiftly. Preparation is key, and I'm pleased that under the guidance of the DMCA, work in resilience planning and recovery is well underway. I've been able to visit the shelters and the emergency stores held by the DMCA, and they're ready to be deployed should any major storm begin an approach to our island. And I've met with the professionals who work closely with staff from my own office to ensure our hurricane safety procedures are up to date and regularly tested. And my team work closely with members of the RMDF who have over the years become at the forefront in responding after any disaster impacts Montserrat. The United Kingdom remains committed to supporting Montserrat and other overseas territories in disaster response and recovery. And this year, the Royal Engineers spent over a month on island conducting training with local response agencies and carrying out field work with local partners in strengthening our resilience to disaster impacts. Over the years, we've also had the support of the Royal Navy, and the United Kingdom continues to stand ready to support Montserrat with humanitarian aid and disaster relief should the island be impacted by a storm or a hurricane. I want to just applaud the work that Dr. Samish has talked about that's been happened so far. There's been lots of preparations. I drive in, I see everything being cut down, I see all the guts being cleared, and I think we're right, we take it for granted, and we just assume all of this work's going to happen and that we're going to be prepared and be safe, but we should really thank all the teams that are doing that work to make sure that we are safe and that we avoid as much as possible any impact on ourselves. I urge those in the private sector and in the community to follow suit in considering how they protect themselves, their staff and their properties during the season. I also want to pick up on avoiding complacency. I've talked about this before, but don't let poor preparation be our real issue, that we're not ready for it. I may have shared that, I used to run marathons, and I ran quite a few, and I got so blasé that I thought I didn't have to do any training for one of them. I can tell you that's really not a good idea at mile 20. And it's the same with this. Don't assume because we've done it before and we think we know what's going to happen, or we think that nothing's going to happen, that we don't need to be prepared. We do, and we need to listen into the radio and make sure that we know when a warning's coming, that we act swiftly. So in closing, I hope the upcoming hurricane season will be a quiet one for Montserrat. I look forward to never having a call from Alvin through the next 6 months in relation to storms. And I look forward to this year's conference as we work together and face whatever comes, I'm sure, with strength and resilience. So, as we've said, we can repeat this parrot fashion, but it's really important. Remember to be prepared, stay prepared. It does only take one. I hope we have a safe hurricane season. Thank you.
Thank you, Her Excellency, for your remarks. I will now call to the podium Ms. Shirley and Quealy, the Information and Outreach Officer at the DMCA, to give you the outlook and forecast for the 2022 hurricane season. Ms. Quealy.
Good morning, everyone. As Ashid mentioned, I'm the Information, Education and Media Officer at the Disaster Management Coordination Agency, and I'm here to present the 2022 hurricane forecast from June 1 to November 30th. Okay, as the presenters before me acknowledged that the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season, the NOAA is predicting an above average hurricane season with a 70% confidence. And they're predicting that we're gonna have, as you look at the pie chart, that there's a 65% probability of an abnormal season and a 25% probability of a near normal and a 10% of below season. So they are predicting 14 to 21 named storms, 6 to 10 hurricanes, and 3 to 6 major hurricanes, bearing in mind that an average hurricane season now has 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. On this slide, we have looked at the forecast of several organizations: NOAA, Colorado State University, the Weather Company, Dale Dexton of Antigua Met Services, the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology, and UK Services. And there's a strong consensus for an active hurricane season. If you look at NOAA, with a 70% confidence, they are predicting an above average hurricane season. Colorado State, well above average. The Weather Company, above average. And Dale Dexton, next door, Antigua Met Services, he's predicting a very busy and active season with the potential of being super hyperactive. And the CIMH, that's the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology, and above average, and the UK Met Services is also predicting an above average hurricane season. And there's also 2 others. Tropical Storm Risk is a British private forecasting firm. They're also predicting an above average hurricane season, and Penn State as well, an above average hurricane season. So they're expecting about 14 to 20 named storms, 6 to 12 major hurricanes, and about 4 major hurricanes. And bearing in mind again that an average hurricane season has 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. Now, what are the factors that drive an above average hurricane season? La Nina, the ongoing La Nina is forecast to continue, and this will lead to less wind shear in the Atlantic Ocean and the Caribbean, which helps tropical cyclones develop and strengthen. Experts forecast that there's a 58% chance of La Nina being dominant through to October, and a 61% chance it will last into fall and early winter 2022. They're also predicting below average wind shear conditions. What below average wind shear conditions? It fuels hurricane. If you have an above average wind shear condition, it will tear apart the hurricanes and prevent them from forming. So we're having below average wind shear conditions, weaker than average tropical Atlantic trade winds, expected warmer than average sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic, and also the active West African monsoon. Now, the Gulf Loop current, the current is a 600-foot-deep river. This is something I'm seeing new for this year, but of recently, there tends to be a lot of hurricanes tend to form in that particular region, the Gulf region. And what they're saying is that the water in that particular region is warmer than normal, and they call it the Gulf Loop current. So those are the factors that drive an above average hurricane season. Now, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration does not make landfall probability, but the Colorado State University does. And they are predicting that there's a 65% probability of at least 1 major hurricane of category 3, 4, or 5 tracking into the Caribbean between 10 to 20 degrees north and 60 to 80 degrees west. And it's above the prediction, which is 42% for an average hurricane season. And Montserrat geographical coordinates, 16.7 degrees north and 62.1 degrees west. Now, Crown Weather Services is another organization that does landfall predictions for the Caribbean. And if you look at the chart here, you see there's an area that is circled in red. And Montserrat is writing there, is suggesting that there's a high probability that these islands will get a major hurricane of category 3 and above, and that's by Crown Weather Services. Now, what are the similarities for the past 3 years? So I looked at 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. So the prediction in 2019 was for an above average hurricane season, in 2020 an above average hurricane season, and in 2021 an above average hurricane season, and now in 2022 an above average hurricane season. And if you look at the chart here, the factors that favored increase in hurricane activity in 2019, 2020, and 2021 still exist today in 2022. So you see the reason why they are predicting an above average hurricane season, because all the factors that were there in 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022 still exist today. Now, in 2019, the actuals were 18 named storms, 6 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. In 2020, that was the most active Atlantic hurricane season on record, the most number of landfalling named storms, 11. In 2020, we had 30 named storms, 14 hurricanes, and 7 major hurricanes, and that was well above average. Bearing in mind that an average hurricane season has 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes, 2020 was a super active hurricane season. Now, looking at 2021, we had 21 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 4 major hurricanes. It was well above average because an average Atlantic hurricane season should have 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. So far, for the last 3 years, it has gone above the average of what is predicted should be an average normal Atlantic hurricane season. So all the factors are here. We just have to pray and hope for the best that will be spared for 2022. Okay, so far this season, we have Alex, Tropical Storm Alex, formed about 690 miles west-south of Bermuda, and a week into a post-tropical cyclone. Alex, a tropical storm, brought rain and strong winds to Bermuda. The system flooded streets and caused numerous power outages in Florida. In Cuba, Alex caused flooding and mudslides, which killed at least 3 people. So we are seeing that just a tropical storm is causing significant damage, so we should be prepared. Now we have a tropical disturbance in the Caribbean. It poses no threat to Montserrat, where it is located at the moment. Now, these are the 2022 Atlantic hurricane storms names. I hope you see a name there. If not, that's good. Okay, so the average Atlantic hurricane season reflects more storms. That is why it has changed from 12 named storms to 6 hurricanes and 3 major hurricanes. Before, it was 12 named storms, 6 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. It was revised and effective 2021 last year, so we are now expecting 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. Higher averages are based on the most recent 30-year climate record. As Mr. Joseph mentioned, that the hurricane prediction are based on what is happening with the climate. Now, hurricanes, tropical storms that impacted Montserrat in recent history. This is a new slide. So our major hurricane was back in 1989. And what is this chart showing? That although our major hurricane was in 1989, approximately 33 years ago, where we had experienced extensive and widespread damage, 10 people were killed, 89 others were injured, and 98% of our houses damaged, and nearly 12,000 of our population then was homeless. Although we had that major storm, we still had other tropical storms and hurricanes over the past several years. As you can see, in 1995, we had Tropical Storm Iris, produced tropical storm force winds and heavy rainfall. We had Hurricane Louis in 1995. The storm proceeded slowly northwestward, causing moderate damage to Montserrat. Some of these damage might be, broken power lines, trees toppling, roofs being blown off. In 1997, we had Hurricane Erica, produced light rainfall and winds. In 1998, we had Hurricane Georges, brought strong winds and heavy rainfall amounting to a maximum of 7.5 inches. In 1999, we had Hurricane Lenny. Category 4 was reported along its western coastline after we had high waves. A boat capsized. I'm sure some of you would remember that. In 2020, we had Earl, Category 2, moderate damage. In 2017, we had Irma, and we also had Maria in 2017. So basically, although our major hurricane was in 1989, we still are impacted by tropical storms and hurricanes over the past several years. We have been impacted, but the damage have been minor. Now, what are the hazards associated with hurricanes? Now, these photos were a result of heavy rainfalls. Now, with the hurricanes, you're going to have excessive rainfall. So if we just rainfall, we had lahars in Pelham, landslides in St. Peter's, and flash flood in Cards Bay. Just imagine with a hurricane. Now, what are the hazards associated with hurricanes or tropical storm? Storm surge and storm tide, heavy rainfall, flash floods, lahars or mud flows, flooding, high winds, rip currents, tornadoes, landslides, and rock falls. And I'm sure some of you are saying tornadoes, but I can recall that I would hear people say that Hugo came with a tornado. Is that correct, Mr. Kernan? Yes. Yes, so we do have tornadoes within hurricanes, so that is also a hazard as well, okay? And rip currents. Now, what are some of the common hurricane terms? Tropical storm watch. It means that tropical storm conditions with sustained winds of 39 to 73 miles per hour are possible within the specified coastal or land area within 48 hours. Tropical storm warning, it means that tropical storm conditions with sustained winds of 39 to 73 miles per hour are expected within the specified coastal or land area within 36 hours. Hurricane watch, hurricane conditions with sustained winds of 74 miles per hour or higher are possible somewhere within the specified coastal or land area. Because hurricane preparedness activities become difficult once winds reach tropical storm force, the hurricane watch is issued 48 hours in advance of the anticipated onset of a tropical storm force winds. Hurricane warning, an announcement is made that hurricane conditions with sustained winds of 74 miles per hour or higher are expected somewhere within the specified coastal or land area because hurricane preparedness activities become difficult once winds reach tropical storm force. The hurricane warning is issued 36 hours in advance of the anticipated onset of tropical storm force winds. Okay? Now, the SAFFIR-SIMPSON hurricane scales and measures shows you the different categories, the winds, the storm surge, and the resulting damage. So if you look at Category 1, Category 2, Category 3, Category 4, Category 3, 4, and 5 are major hurricanes. And if you look at Category 1, trees, you have resulting damage, trees, you may have down power lines. Category 2, sign for building damage. Category 3, widespread damage or flooding. Category 4, buildings destroyed or damaged. And Category 5, catastrophic damage and flooding. And flooding will be in the form of flooding, inland flooding as flash flooding, flooding in your homes, etc. Now, the 2022 hurricane guides are available. You'll see there's copies in the conference room, and they are available at supermarkets as well and other businesses across Montserrat. Thank you, and it only takes one storm to hit Montserrat to cause a disaster. Regardless of the activity predicted in the Atlantic seasonal outlook, residents, businesses, and government departments are urged to be prepared, stay prepared. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Quealy, for that very informative presentation. Questions from the presentation will be taken in our working session, so you are asked to note your questions and we will address them there. I will now call on the Operations and Logistics Officer at the DMCA, Mr. Kelvin White, to give you the DMCA's hurricane readiness. Mr. White.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kelvin White. I'm the Operations and Logistics Officer at the DMCA. I'll be presenting to you this morning the preparation from the department for the upcoming hurricane season. The categories that we covered this morning would fall under operations, communications, logistics, and shelters. So on the operational side, this holds one of the most important activities for the department. The hurricane season ends on November 30th, or preparation starts on November 30th. So there's no rest period in between in terms of when the season starts to when our preparation starts for the next year. All right? So one of the things that we cover is the preparation and maintenance of the National EOC in a state of readiness. The inspection of the hurricane shelters, which I can gladly say we had done or completed yesterday. The emergency generators, the inspection and servicing, which is something that we ensure that is done to ensure that if we have to be activated, and we're disrupted in terms of our electricity, that we have coverage in terms of that. And that also bears fruit for the emergency shelters. All right? I can still boast some years later in terms of our support from the UK government through the FCDO in terms of the relief stock that we got in 2019. Your Excellency, I've heard your praise just by the wayside in terms of your visit, so I'm still relishing in that. So yes, we do have emergency supplies that in the event that we're impacted, that we can actually support the response and relief efforts of the Montserrat. This, in terms of daily monitoring of the weather reports, it is sad to say that forms my life for the next 6 months. This is something that I do, I can't say twice a day, but ever so often just to check to see if anything pops up. Because if anything pops up, I must be in a position that I can inform and advise the director accordingly. Food stocks. Back in the past, we had a situation where we used to actually go out to the supermarkets to ask them, how much food do you have in the event of? It has been streamlined so much and makes my life much easier that I can just make a phone call to trade and they'll give me that information readily. So that is something that I must say that I'm happy for. In terms of our operations, as I mentioned, in terms of the EOC, is ensuring that we have the resources available that if we are activated, that we can, and we're in a position to run the EOC as efficiently as it should be. And that falls under in terms of the stockpile of the standard forms and operational forms that we would need. So, and this also, next slide, Shalian. This also falls under us ensuring that our internal plans are reviewed and up to date. I mentioned in this slide the DMCA's COVID. Mr. Reinhardt alluded to it in his presentation in terms of our preparation for the shelters in this COVID era. We're now looking to transition, and I said quote unquote, in inverted commas, back to some level of normalcy. This discussion is ongoing in terms of how would we operate our shelters in this event, right? But we do have, I must say, we do have a policy in place in terms of how we would operate our shelters, in terms of numbers, sanitation, and so on. if somebody should present in the shelter, what do you do? So there are procedures that are laid out in terms of what we would do in the event of. Our national alerting system. This is something that we have afforded to us for a number of years now, and this is a testament to the technical staff at the DMCA in terms of keeping this system running. So we do have a testing and maintenance schedule that goes monthly, and if anything should pop up, we're in a position that we can respond. And I must say, the system is up and functional, so you're safe. Our satellite phones are tested regularly. There are times we have to encourage persons to actually use them, because we don't use them, the minutes just stay there and we can't do anything about them. So we encourage persons to use them. So the accounts are up to date. And one of the things that we do, and we're going to reach out to some of the other agencies, if there are agencies inside here that does have sat phones, we would be grateful to know those contact numbers so that in the event of that we can contact persons. We do have the information for regional partners and stakeholders, i.e. CDMA, Antigua, which was national focal point, and so on. So in the event that we need to, we have a way outside regular cell phone service that most times goes down if something should impact us, that we have that available to us, that we can actually reach out to persons. Government vehicles and contact lists. I mentioned that we, in terms of preparation starts the 30th of November last year. One of the things that we try to do is to ensure that if we should be impacted, we know the resources that are available to us, that we can respond. Right? And this is one of the ways of doing that, in terms of knowing how much, not just how much vehicles we have available, but are they functional? And this is something that we rely heavily on Public Works for assistance in terms of support to get that done. Next slide, Shirley. Communication. In any emergency, communication plays a very important part, right? And the DMCA does regular testing of its system, which is the VHF, the handheld, and the HF radios, right? We have continued radio checks with our regional partners, CDMA, which we have on Fridays, and Antigua, which is the regional focal point, which we are part of, on Tuesdays and Thursdays. As I mentioned before, sat phones, we regularly test them in terms of their use. We have done communication training over the years, and we will continue. So if there's anybody that needs refreshers in terms of the department, feel free to contact the department and we'll arrange to have some refresher training with your staff and your department. Next slide, Shirley. As I mentioned, finally, and just a brief, we have been trying to get this done since March. And for whatever reason and circumstances, when it was available, COVID popped in. The Jubilee, the Queen's Baton popped in because the technical person who was supposed to be on that had a week where he had to focus. And then right after that, I fell victim of that scourge that we had a month ago. And I was incapacitated for a number of weeks, right? So, but I can say we are now have completed our shelter inspections for this year. And I'm happy with the state that we're in. There's things that we need to get done, things that we need to fine tune, but I think that we're in a happier place. Next slide, Shirley. So this is our 2022 approved list. You're going to see 10, but available to us this year is only 6. We need to have that discussion that Cabinet we're going to have to make some adjustment in terms, because we cannot just change this list at the whim and fancy. It has to be done at the cabinet level. So that is the reason why you still have 10. Braids Primary School, which is number 6 there, is no longer available to us as a shelter. It is no longer fit for purpose. The area that we use has been modified. So Braids is quite, in essence, not available. You have the Salem Primary School, and I must say, I've heard in the grapevine that there's good news for the future, and I'll be keeping my finger on that pulse very closely. The St. Peter's Old School, it has some issues in terms of water seepage, and that is the only reason why it is not available to us. It's not for want of trying to rectify that issue, but when it rains, because, maybe, I don't know if it's because of the age of the building itself, but water actually seeps through the walls. So that is the issue that we have with St. Peter's. But in terms of availability, we have, at this time, the Lookout Girls Guide, the New Ebenezer Seventh-day Adventist Church, the downstairs, the hall, at the Cavalier Hill, 2 facilities at Cavalier Hill, the Education Center and the Coin and Craft Center, the Salem Pentecostal Church downstairs, and the Davie Hill Community Center. I must say we have a total of 420 beds available to us. But that, as I said, would depend on the discussions that we have going forward as relates to COVID and the protocols, because that would significantly be reduced based on if we have to, in terms of what numbers of uptake that we have in each facility. Next. Training. As I mentioned before, radio training, it is ongoing, and where possible, if you have a need, reach out to us, and we will assist you in terms of training. In terms of internal training, continues for the department, in terms of persons' readiness, and if we have to be activated for the EOC, how they themselves, how we would transition from the day-to-day activities into the EOC mode. Disaster chairpersons, which is an important arm of the DMCA, which reaches out into the community. These are the persons who we depend upon at the community level to carry out the mandate of the department. And I just put the EOC training on that this morning because I feel, as was mentioned before, in terms of being complacent, I think over the years, not having to activate the EOC, persons may not be up to par in terms of, if it is activated, what my responsibilities are. And I think it's something that we need to address, and we'll be addressing it in rather short terms. So just be mindful that hopefully by next month, we should be in a position that we can offer some EOC training for especially those persons in this forum. Okay? And if I'm not mistaken, that's my last slide.
Thank you, Mr. White, for that presentation. We will now take a short break as we will commence our working session. So we'll have a short break, and we can have a refreshment on the outside, and then we will commence in 10 minutes our working session. Thank you.